you for having me. It's great to be here. I think we'll try and make it quite interactive. So if anyone wants to ask a question throughout, just put your hand up. And then at the end, we'll also leave a bit of time for questions. And I know Jack's got some burning questions as well for Julian, so we'll leave time for that. So I think a good place to start would just be to have a bit more of an introduction on both businesses and kind of where you are in the Blitzscaling process. And then we'll go from there.
On you start.
Yeah, hello again. Julian from Tier Mobility. We are in a quite hot and crazy market right now in the scooter business. We founded Tier just this summer and end of July and scaled it to a couple of markets now. We are in 3 countries by today. We launched Austria, we are in a couple of cities in Spain, and just today launching Lisbon. And also from the employee side, first two founders, then 3, and with an intern to 40 by today. I guess next week it will be 50 or 55, going pretty crazy, and we after I think roughly 8 weeks after our seed round, we already closed the Series A, and there we are today.
Cool. I was always a bit nervous having to do this alongside an e-scooter company. It's not fair. I think the difference between Blitzscaling between you and I is really different. You guys are like that and we're like that. I'm Jack, I'm the founder of Sift. We launched 3 years ago now, almost to the week. We operate in 6 cities in the UK. We have about 2,000 clients, which range across your typical bars, restaurants, stadiums. We now do lots of stuff in warehousing, and we're increasingly getting into the facilities management side of things, which is your cleaners, security guards. We've got about 17,500 staff that work via the app. We have an extremely strange marketplace in that it's a sort of there's a lot of B2C businesses like TaskRabbit out there, etc. We are a B2B business, and it comes with a very strange bunch of dynamics which are usually a bit different to a lot of the other marketplaces out there. And we now have 82 full-time staff across those offices, which has meant that I've had to learn how to manage people, which has been a nightmare.
And I'm interested to know, when you first had the concept for the business and started out, did you always want to blitzscale, or did it kind of happen accidentally? You thought, okay, we're on to something, let's ramp things up. Maybe, yeah, Julian.
In our case, I think we knew that we have to be super quick. However, so after closing the seed round, we thought like, okay, we're gonna raise, probably start to raise end of year. But we found out that we should be way quicker than that. So it's from summer to over the last 3 months, there are a lot of other companies starting. So we just have to be. It's a necessity to scale super fast.
Yeah, I'm probably not in the same sort of degree, but we knew that ultimately in a marketplace, a lot of the time that it's the first person to reach a certain scale ends up benefiting and getting the reward of all the network effects associated to it. So we definitely knew that we were going to have to scale really quickly. However, I'd say we had a much sort of slower journey as a result, trying to make sure that we got things right first of all. So, unlike some marketplaces that go out and launch cities, almost every week, we stayed in London for basically probably a good 1.5 to 2 years before we decided that the time was right for us to go out and launch other cities.
Because I'm interested in the geographical expansion point, because in the talk earlier they were saying it's all about creating supply demand within a constrained area. You guys have just blitzed 6 different cities, and I think you're targeting kind of pockets in those cities. So in terms of your strategy, why did you take that approach rather than going for one city and getting every different area of it?
I think what we started, so we started in one city, and I think it took us 4 to 6 weeks to launch that city. And as it became winter, it doesn't make sense right now to scale that city to the extent. So it's Vienna, Austria. But what we did there is we scaled our operations, so to say. So we really wanted to make sure that we don't scale a shitty operation business over a lot of other countries. It took us 3 weeks to really day and night look into it and hold our team and the operations partners accountable for really mastering these processes. And when we felt ready, we opened the next city.
And is your approach very much some may not work, but better to find out faster?
Yes.
The fail fast strategy.
Yes. Yeah.
Is that built into your cost model out of interest?
It has to. It has to. I think. Like so far, we are pretty lucky with the cities. Every city is a little bit different, but it works so far. But I think there will be a moment where we recognize, okay, for some reason this city in Spain is not working like this other city in Spain, and we move our scooters somewhere else.
And Jack, with you, so scaling can mean lots of different things. It can mean geographical expansion, scaling profits, which isn't something startups often focus on, or it can be scaling in terms of moving into different areas. So how do you look to the future and think about that?
Well, I guess the way that we started was very focused and we actually focused very highly just on central London to make sure that at all points we could connect everyone with a job. And that meant that we actually only focused on front of house first of all. So rather than doing all the back of house roles, we made sure that we had one specific role, and then we did that really well, and then we could layer all the other roles on top of things, and we could start to scale that way. It was interesting that we didn't actually then move to another city until the market started to pull us. So what we found is we had a lot of clients that were in London that would have a lot of sites in, say, Manchester, Leeds, etc. And they were saying, look, when you're ready to go, we will be there and work for you, because it's very hard at the early days to build up liquidity in any marketplace. And we tried to go to Manchester originally without that there, and it took us a lot longer to do. Recently we went to Birmingham, and I think we've kind of got that playbook now where we can repeat things very quickly. So we went to Birmingham, and it became our second largest city in month one. So it actually overtook, and Manchester, Leeds especially, are doing really well as cities. But we went there with knowing that we had 3, 4, 5 large contracts to do. So essentially we weren't trying to scale the demand side at the same time as trying to scale the supply side. We're just focusing on, right, it's there for us. And as soon as the more and more supply that we can get onto the app, the quicker, the more we can supply essentially. So it's actually been probably the first time in any city that we've actually had supply side sort of constraints and scaling just because of the speed we're trying to scale at. Whereas every other city was the case of, right, let's slow down recruitment for 1 week, 2 weeks, because we need to make sure that we've got more demand, because you don't want to have too much of one or the other.
So on that, do you have techniques for maintaining the balance of supply and demand? If one's lagging, do you have a kind of SWAT team that goes in, or an acquisition strategy to rapidly scale up the bit that's too low? So
we've basically tried every single channel now, ranging, and over time, we used to sort of get our workers 90% from job boards. Now it's down to sort of 6%. So we've got various different channels, and we know, from this one we can get chefs, from this one we get waiting staff. So we've become much more efficient in knowing that for every sort of penny or pounds that we spend here, we'll be able to get access to this type of job. And if we end up short somewhere, we can just sort of go and spend a lot more money doing that essentially, and allow us to attract people. The one thing that we learned is that at the beginning, to launch these cities, costs a lot more money to recruit all the people at the early stage, and over time it actually the price goes down dramatically. Our cost of acquisition in London now is minute compared to all the other cities. We, unlike a lot of apps out there, can control our demand and supply really well, because we can control who gets access to the app. So they still have to come through a vetting process with us before they get access to the app to make sure that they're actually good enough to do the job. And if we didn't do that, we probably wouldn't have many clients, because I think 30-40% of people that come to us don't get access to the app for a myriad of reasons.
Mm-hmm. And Julian, because I guess acquisition for you guys is different in the sense that with Jack, if you want a job, you'll be quite proactive, whereas you guys are trying to create a brand from scratch, acquire users, also compete with some quite big players. So what's your approach to that?
I mean, the good part is that the supply side is pretty easy. We just order scooters. Yeah. It comes with a fundraising problem, but we don't have to build that supply like over time. So right now I think we have to scale then our fundraising efforts to master that supply side. And the nice thing about the scooters, they advertise themselves on the streets. So we really did not do any marketing in the first city. Also doing only a little bit of social media right now, but not paid. So far it's also the demand side is just coming. Let's see how long that lasts. But
and will you, when you do have a big marketing drive, do you think you'll take a multi-pronged approach, or i.e. using traditional media and PR as well as digital, or do you think you'll focus very much on particular paid channels?
Well, do you even have a marketing department?
We have We have one marketing person. Yes, we do. But I think it's not an online paid game.
Why is that?
I mean, I did Coop before, and we saw that you can accelerate that growth on the demand side, but you hit a certain ceiling, and you just start paying more and more and more, but it's not scalable as the city. It comes with that city by city approach, and I think you could accelerate it a little bit more, but it's not paying off that much.
And you mentioned earlier raising, which is obviously a huge topic or challenge. How important do you think the amount of money you've raised is to blitzscaling? So are there techniques that you can use to blitzscale that don't involve having raised more money than all your competitors, or do you think it is very heavily correlated?
Yeah, it very much depends on what marketplace you're running. For us, it's slightly less important, because ultimately with us, if we have a client that isn't happy with the staff, then they're just not going to use you again. So what we found is that we had a bunch of competitors that came in raising close to 100 million, somewhere at 50 million, and it didn't really impact us at all, because ultimately, unfortunately, and I wish we were just purely a tech play, but we have people, and that's the biggest element, that question mark. So what we found is that a lot of them were sort of overspending on massive budgets to go out and try and get the market, but the people they were sending in are their products. So if the technology works and the person you get, in our case, isn't good, it doesn't matter, because the product for us is still the person. So we actually found that, as long as we spent our money wisely, is that we could still scale a lot quicker than them, and that's rang true. There are players in London which have raised plenty less, and there's plenty of players that raised a lot more, and it's more been about how do you really nail down the model to ensure that you can get repeatability in the marketplace over and over and over.
I mean, we have to put almost all of our money into hardware, into scooters, and the second pocket would be in finding finding the right people that help us scale, and that's are willing to scale with us, and they together with us have to master the operations, and we don't overspend in marketing. That's the good part, but I think the hardware is just pretty expensive.
And you guys raised your Series A very, very quickly after seed. When you were having the conversations with those Series A investors, how do you prove either traction or sell the vision, the Blitzscaling vision that perhaps you didn't have at seed in order to command more money, higher valuation, etc.?
So yesterday I read on Crunchbase that we raised. So it was 8 days between seed and Series A. That's not true. It was more like eight weeks. But
a lot then.
But I think like the Northzone, our Series A investor, I think they pretty much trusted in the team. We closed that Series A, I think, probably 2 days before we launched the first city. I think we could show that we are ready to scale, but we have not put a single scooter on the ground. So it was pretty much trust in the team, and now I think we can show how we scale and are ready to launch a city every week.
Mm-hmm. How long can that last?
Probably, hopefully for 2 years or 3 years.
Wow.
Let's see.
And we touched on earlier the operational challenges of scaling. So how do you manage that? For you guys, there's a lot of regulation. For you, Jack, there's a lot of hiring the right people to have on the ground in each different city. So what are the biggest headaches and almost the biggest danger areas where you can have missteps by scaling too quickly?
Yeah, I mean, what we're trying to do is essentially look at, say, a deco or manpower and basically digitize that. So it's quite a big task given, sort of the billions and billions that they turn over and the huge amount of manual processes that they have. So what we found was it was very easy in year 1 and year 2 to sort of scale to the size that we're at. And what we find in year 3 now is that a lot more of our focus from a development perspective is focused around operational efficiency. And I think a lot of our competitors have sort of scaled to a stage, and if you don't focus massively on the operational efficiency side of things, what you find is that as you scale, just your costs grow, and your unit economics don't really make too much sense. So I'd say this year a lot of time has been spent making sure that that we're ready now for the next year, 2 years growth. And I think so from an automation perspective, making sure that you have the strongest platform out there, and making sure that you're not just purely doing things around, hiring hundreds of people to basically be operations managers to allow you to scale. Although I think you can do some of that in the beginning to sort of, I guess, fake it before you make it type thing, and learn what it is that you need to automate. I think, though, the most important thing we found as we scaled and launched new cities is that you should not go to a new city until you've found the right city manager. Too many times, I think 2 or 3 times, we've hired the wrong people. And that's the amount of time that set us back has been quite dramatic. There was a lesson that I learned, because I said it to 2 or 3 of the first people that we got wrong, is that I sort of liked the person, and I remember thinking to myself, going, this person will do. And that was the sign that it's wrong. Every time I thought this person will do, thinking that they might be good enough, it was wrong. But the times that we got it right was when when I was like, this person will show us what to do. Mm-hmm. And those people have been fantastic. So my co-founder pulls me back every time, and he's like, are you saying that again? Are you saying that this person will do? I'm like, damn, yeah, I am. You're right. We can't get this person.
But it's a temptation when you need someone urgently. The temptation is to hire.
You're running online. You've set yourself a business plan for where you want to get to. And just because it says it on a financial model, you're thinking, right, I want to do it next week now. Mm-hmm. When the reality is it doesn't matter if you wait an extra 3-4 weeks. And every single time that we've waited, it's only ever then been about 2-3 weeks before we found that special person that has resulted in things being great. Even when, for a while, it looked like there was just no one in Cardiff, for example. And then suddenly, in the space of a week, we found 3 brilliant people.
Mm-hmm. You've forgotten the question. It was so challenges as you scale. Yeah. Where is it easy to make missteps?
Yeah, I like your point. I think if you hire the wrong people there, it can set you back quite heavily. That's why we, for now, rely just on personal networks. I think we have one shop, a few descriptions out there, but I think everyone we hired so far came referred by our networks. Mm-hmm. Let's see how long that lasts. But so far we are super lucky with the people we hired.
And things like regulation, obviously, with the area you operate in, it's almost catching up with the innovation and the speed of rollout. So is that something that worries you? Do you think you can influence how that regulation kind of pans out, or what's the approach?
It's super different in every country. So Germany is getting ready to hopefully have regulation in place next spring, and the sun is out again. In Spain, for example, every city can do a little bit what they want right now. For us, that means like be good to the cities, understand what they want, and be super flexible. So we had like every week, I think we are only 80% sure where we go next the next week. Or like just today we had to pull back in one city because they are not as ready as we are, and are missing, I don't know, one or two papers. But we just be super flexible and ship our people and the scooters then to another city.
How much of a kind of formula is it? And I guess this probably applies for you, Jack, as well. Is it as simple as working out that formula and then just almost wrapping it up for each different city? Or
I think we are finding out the formula right now.
Yeah.
So, a little bit too early to
Maybe I can have got some advice. Finally, you can tell me about how to raise money, and we'll share some stories. So, for what we've realised very early on, so what we used to do when we used to go and launch a new city was that, and this was entirely wrong, is that we would go to the city. No, we wouldn't even. So we'd hire people. We would bring them down to our office for 2 weeks, give them some training, and then be like, right, go launch the city. That whilst we succeeded with the city, it took much longer to do. So what everyone sort of VC kept on saying at seed stage, I wasn't really sure if I understood them that well or not, is that you need to develop your playbook for how you can repeat things really, really quickly. So we did look to the likes of Deliveroo and Uber and things like that to see like how do you do that whole entire city thing really quickly. So these days now we have an expansion team who are people who they don't tend to be married or have any children because we have to send them around the UK all the time. So there's a specific type of person. And they're very good at sales, they're very good at account management, they're very good at the onboarding process. So they just go and live in the city. So I went and did one of them to sort of learn sort of the process around how we do it. I didn't do Birmingham because I didn't want to go there. So we sent someone else. And, you know, this person, they land there. That's so offensive to Birmingham. So they go there and they get, you know, they start and they get the first clients which already want to work with us. Then we get the workers on board, and then they do the hiring of the people, and then they train the people and they stay with those people for about 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks, just enough to the point so that they understand what it is to do what we do. And that's really, really repeatable. So developing that has been quite key to us figuring out how do we do that very quickly. I think if you look at a lot of the best marketplaces that have to have any feet on the ground, that's exactly how you should do it. Doing what we did the first time around is definitely not the way to do it.
That's how you learn, I guess, as well.
Yeah, that's the learning part.
So are there any burning questions? Because we can come to them now if there are. Nope.
Oh, there's one.
Oh, there is one.
I can stand up. Just a quick question to Julian. In terms of how you choose what factors to look at in the cities, and why have you chosen, Spain is obviously Barcelona, Madrid, but then Lisbon raises questions whether the city is large enough and whether you should look again maybe Istanbul and some cities were alive and other guys are not doing it because for whatever reason, Istanbul is the biggest city in Europe, right?
Yeah.
And are you looking at Istanbul? Are you going the traditional, European? We're gonna do Berlin, then we're gonna do Hamburg, and we're gonna focus on those small cities, and are you actually gonna Blitzscale and?
Yeah, so for 2018, we look into Europe, but we are already looking beyond that. Yeah, and to your question, like how we choose the cities, we have quite a sophisticated model with I don't know, I forgot, like 12 dimensions or so, and rank it up and down. But in the end, it's a function of like where can you start first, and like how ready is the city. And I think we have not talked to Istanbul yet. I have to ask our expansion team, but right now it's a little bit easier for us to scale in Europe first.
And I had a question around kind of building defensibility. So both of you operate in fairly competitive markets, and obviously scaling fast is one way to build defensibility. What other ways do you think you can compete against existing competitors, but also not knowing who's around the corner to start competing potentially with bigger budgets?
So, I mean, look, one way is simply to grow faster. You get all the rewards of network effects from that, and that's the benefit of scaling quicker. Increasingly what we try and do is we get massively ingrained in our clients' internal processes. So we very much become part of them, which means that we get access to shifts and things like that in a far quicker manner. That's allowed us to sign some really, really large, 5-year contracts. I mean, one contract we signed as a result of developing this platform to become integrated into their internal environment allowed us to sign a contract which per year is bigger than what we were doing year 2 from one client. So it's allowed us to very much change the dynamics, and that we're increasingly cutting people out from being able to work with that client for 5 years, which gives us a very rosy outlook and also allows us to scale within those clients in a much quicker manner. For the first 2 years, though, we didn't have that as an option to us. So that's very much been a large part now of our strategy for the last sort of 6 months or so, and for our strategy going forward. What you find as well as we scale, clients give us more and more trust. So even if we can't become intertwined in their internal processes, they are increasingly more happy to allow us to basically have exclusivity over their whole environment. And it's also the benefits of making sure at the beginning, because we were very focused on making sure that we did just the front of house roles, we couldn't sign a big contract with anyone because they would need chefs as well, for example. Or we weren't in the 6 cities that they are in, so you couldn't sign the larger contracts. So now that we're a much larger company, we're able to actually look at and go, we can provide all of your supply across everything that you do, which is just a benefit from getting bigger. But ultimately, it is a race as well, and funding plays a large part in that.
Defensibility, I think a lot about it.
Yeah.
I mean, speed and supply in the market is, I think, right now the first step. Be in a market, have enough supply, and then differentiate over time in the hardware, in the scooter. So right now, nobody is differentiated, to be fair. And then make these little differences in the product and the user experience that make the people always choose Tier over the other 2 competitors if they stand next to each other. And we will see how that plays out. We will put a lot of love in the product.
And you mentioned the other day on that point as well, just operational execution and always being the best. And often I think that's something people overlook. They plow into whatever area their business is in without really thinking about the finer detail.
Yeah, I think we are thinking about this business. It's a tech-driven ops business, and we have to master the ops. Otherwise, we will just run out of cash.
I doubt that. Just raise more.
And Jack, you raised an interesting point the other day, which was that it kind of becomes easier as you grow, easier to raise money because people probably want to invest in you rather than someone starting out, easier because the network effects happen. Does it feel like that day in, day out, or are there just new challenges that come along?
No, it gets harder and harder all the time.
Okay.
Every time you reach a certain scale, suddenly you start to look for the next part of what you want to do. I think it gets easier if your goal is just to be as big as a decent sized player in the market. But ultimately, our goal from the very beginning was originally to be the largest player in the UK. Soon it'll start to become the largest player in Europe, and then it'll be the largest player globally. And I think ultimately, I remember saying to our Series A and seed investors, they were sort of like, if we give you this money, promise me you will not sell out for something, your first offer that you get. So we made that promise, but we didn't need it anyway, because the goal ultimately is to create a massive company. So by that in nature just means that we've constantly always got major new challenges. It's just a case of the challenges are slightly different on a larger scale. And hopefully we learn enough lessons along the way of what not to do to make sure that we don't make the same mistakes. I think if you look at all the apps in our space. I think the one biggest question mark that still raises over every single one is which will be the one that can prove that they can launch internationally and do it at the same speed at which we say launch cities within the UK. That's the one thing that no one's really properly proven yet, is that they can go to a foreign city and scale that really quickly. I'm pretty sure it's very, very doable, but everyone's still yet to really prove that they can do that really well.
And this is kind of probably, unless people have got questions, a good question to conclude on, and that's, when you look 5 years in the future, what do your businesses mean to the world? What do you hope for in a dream scenario? Look,
I think the way that I look at it, I mean, it's very hard to look 5 years ahead, because if I rewind 3 years, I had no idea that where we were going to be in 2 years or 3 years. So it's very difficult to know. Like, I think for us, I'd like to ensure that, that probably by that time we are sort of the de facto way that you pick up work across Europe in the temp space, but then also moving into more some of the perm sort of space. So we become less of a marketplace for temporary staff and more of a case of this is just where you pick up. This is how your sort of life cycle within each of these industries operates. So that, you come and you do temp work here, then you get a perm job, then you come back to us, and we just become sort of like your online, your verified digital CV of yourself, rather than utilizing this, piece of paper via job boards side of things. So I think it'd be great if we could get to that point, and I think that'd be a very exciting thing.
So in 5 years, I think I'm personally super happy if we contributed to how our cities, our urban mobility behavior is playing out. I just learned yesterday that the average car owner in Berlin spends 100 hours in traffic, not in traffic, but just circling around looking for a parking space. If we can just make a little contribution to reducing that and make the inner cities give it back to the people over time. Paris is experimenting with car-free zones. Madrid is banning cars, and I hope we can contribute to a change in mobility behavior and how our cities look like. That personally would give me a lot back, and company-wise, we really want to be play a part in the set of mobility options our users have.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much. I'm sure you're both happy to answer questions afterwards if anyone else wants to ask anything. Oh, there's one there.
Yes, I was here in the pool. I was wondering, blitzscaling is really important, speed is important, team is the key, as you say. But till which point can you propose wage that are affordable so that your unique economics still be feasible to reach profitability at one point?
Yeah, so I think when we, at seed and Series A stage, the conversations were very different to the ones that we're having now. At seed stage, Series A, all we would talk about is basically growth, to the detriment often to exactly what the unit economics are, although it was a concentration. I think once we get to Series B stage in our marketplace, we talk far less about growth because we kind of assume that's a given. And we're far more talking about contribution margin, gross margin, take rates, which are more conversations that my co-founder, who's a very financially driven person, enjoys a lot more than say I do, because I'm just sort of like, I want to scale. But so the conversations we have with venture capital firms are very different these days to that they used to be. And I think, by and large, times are changing a little bit, and now and that I think most venture capital firms want to invest in companies whose unit economics make sense from far earlier days, maybe unless you're in America.
I was more thinking about the team. So if you meet a great talent,
Yeah.
that could open a city for you.
Yeah.
This negotiating salary really
Yeah.
really crazy. Do you go for it or?
No. No, look, ultimately you have to think makes sense. If you start hiring a bunch of people that cost too much, nothing's going to make sense economic-wise for you, because obviously, yeah. Sorry, I totally misunderstood your question. Yeah.
I also got a question for you, Jack. You mentioned the importance of the city manager.
Yeah.
What are the skills or the personality you're looking for?
So all of our city managers are very commercially driven people. So they're more like senior business development people by and large. what we try and like to do is find sort of 3 people to do onboarding, account management, senior business development. And we have the idea that that senior business development will probably move in to be the city manager role. But we don't give it to them necessarily from day one because we have a expansion person that's there acting as that role. And as long as they then step into that gap, then they take it. But ultimately, every city is about driving growth. So if you put the person in charge that isn't that commercially minded, is perhaps more operationally minded, you may then lose out on the scaling side of things, which for the new city launch is the worst thing that can happen.
Yes.
You said that you're a tech company, but with some operational that you need to get it right. I'm just wondering, what are your biggest operational challenges, and have they changed since you were seed raising versus the Series A? And how did you explain that? Because I understand that you're still very early process. And how are you planning to deal with those operational challenges?
Do you want to repeat the question?
Yes, the question was what our biggest operational changes are, and if they changed between seed and Series A. We have a lot of challenges. So let's see. I think it changed a little bit from first, like where do we get the scooters, and just like from sourcing, bringing all parts together, to now like how do we master the logistics to the city, and then the operations in the city. I think it's changing literally every week right now. So we think we nailed this part, and new challenges coming up.
Great, I think we better end there. But thank you very much, Julian and Jack, and thank you all for listening.
Thank you.